Welcome to ATX TV from the couch, everyone. I'm Sandra Gonzalez from CNN. Before we start our conversation, I'd like to remind everyone that you can provide feedback and join in the conversations happening around this year's festival using the hashtag TV Together, and make sure to tag at ATX Festival. I've also been asked to remind you all that this year the festival will be raising money for Direct Relief and the Actors Fund, so you should see a donate button if you're watching on YouTube. This is an unprecedented time that for many is also a time of unprecedented need. So if you are able to, please give. And speaking of this strange time, on to today's panel. I believe we have an introduction that I'm going to share with you now.
Hey y'all, welcome to ATX TV from the couch. I'm Mari McIntyre from the Television Academy. Sad that we're not all together in Austin, but glad that we can continue our long-standing partnership with ATX, bringing you compelling and inspiring festival content. During this very difficult time, television has helped to keep us all informed, inspired us to support each other, and brought us together while we've had to remain physically apart. But to keep us entertained, the television industry has had to significantly change how we approach development and production on existing and new programs. Today's panel will explore this pivot that many of us in the industry have been faced with: how to reinvent literally everything we do in order to deliver great stories and great entertainment to all of us watching at home. So, sit back and enjoy, and I look forward to seeing all of you in person next year in Austin. Stay safe and be well.
So when the coronavirus pandemic took hold in the US in early March, TV and film productions across the country and the world were forced to shutter, or in the cases of some of the shows represented here today, adapt in ways the industry has never seen before. Today's conversation is going to touch on some of the innovation that's taken place during this time and give us a look forward to what changes might still yet be to come here in Hollywood as we ponder a return to set. Joining me today are Simone Missick, star of CBS's All Rise. Just going to turn on her video here. Here we go. Great. Welcome, Simone.
Thank you.
We have RJ Freed, creator, showrunner, executive producer, performer on CBS All Access series Tooning Out the News. Hi, RJ.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course. I don't think you have enough titles. We also have Rob Crabbe, executive producer on The Late Late Show with James Corden. Hi, Rob.
How you doing?
Great. Audrey Morrissey, showrunner and executive producer on NBC's The Voice.
Hi there.
Hi, Audrey. And Carina MacKenzie from CW's Roswell, New Mexico. Great. So guys, Simone, I'm going to start with you just because we had the pleasure of speaking ahead of All Rise's first socially distanced filmed episode. I think you all were the first TV drama to try to pull off this feat. And the reason I'm starting with you is because during our conversation, I was so impressed by sort of the spirit of collaboration that drove what you all were able to accomplish with that episode. Tell me a little bit about what went into that and how you all made that happen by sort of pulling together. Actors took on so many different roles for this episode.
Yeah. When production shut down, obviously everyone was happy to be safe, disappointed that we wouldn't have a real finale. You know, this is our freshman series. We were so happy to get to 22 episodes. And so to stop mid 21 was kind of heartbreaking. So when our producers brought this idea to us, I don't think a single person hesitated. It was the excitement of one, being able to try something completely new that had not been done before, that, we would be able to give a proper season farewell to our fans, but then also embark on this new thing. And none of us really had any clue what it was going to entail. I think that's where the excitement came from. We were all foolish and blind in not really realizing what that would be. And so on any given day, we are doing 13 different departments' jobs just to do a scene. Don't let it be multiple scenes, multiple days in one day. And, you realize when you're on set and, oh God, we have to do a day one scene and then we got to go to day 3. You're like, well, at least we got hair and makeup and all these people that get paid really well to do a really great job. And now you're in your kitchen trying to remember what your makeup looked like and, where to put your lights. But there is this feeling of, much like the adage that's being said throughout this time that we're dealing with, we are all in this together. And so the idea that this particular episode was not only a love letter to our fans, but to the essential workers who could not stay home during this time, it was like, oh, okay, so I have to be a little tired for a couple hours versus going out and doing something that matters and gives people a little bit of hope. We all just banded in there. A lot of us are theater actors. And so, we've been doing our own hair and makeup and having very low budget situations for a while now. So it felt like home, at home.
At home, exactly. Rob, I know you all took James Corden into his home as well, into his garage to be specific.
Yes.
Tell me about his reaction when you all first started toying with the idea of, okay, how do we make this show work at home, and sort of what that adjustment was like, both on a production standpoint and not having an audience. For someone like James, that must have been torture.
Everything just happened so fast. I remember there was a Wednesday in March where I think we were double taping, and we were starting to hear whispers that we might not be allowed to have an audience that night. Mm-hmm. And then by the end of the night, we no longer had a show at a studio. And so it all happened in a day where we went from potentially no audience to then no show at all in the studio. And so we had to move really quickly. It didn't look quick on air because we took our time getting back on air. And actually the first 2 weeks we were focused on making a primetime special called Home Fest that ran on CBS to raise money for Feed the Children and CDC. And so that was kind of our pilot for how we would do a show from home. Because we needed to set up James's garage so that he could shoot alone in his house. And so we wanted it to look good, or as good as it could, coming from his garage. And so we put 4 cameras in there and had it lit. And he had a lot of the stuff that you see on camera in his garage. And so we sort of got set up, and his son goes in and powders them, and we put on a show with everybody on Zoom calls from their homes, our director in Seal Beach and my partner Ben and I on a Zoom call in our houses, and the writers. And we've just had to learn it as we've done it. So it's been a lot of trial and error and figuring out how the technology will work. And I've learned words like Wirecast and Evercast and things I never thought I know anything about. And so just sort of making do, but also trying to keep the relationship between James and a guest, so you can see over the shoulder as he looks into the Zoom as the person he's talking to, and gotten away with giving up on laughter, giving up on any sort of idea of an audience for right now, and just trying to put as joyful a show on as we possibly can from inside a lonely dude's garage.
Now, Audrey, Rob mentioned sort of the tech part of this a little bit, but I don't envy your job because you had multiple hosts to teach technology to make sure they were lit, to tell them, no, Blake, you're supposed to look in this camera. Tell me about what that process was like and how much you drank during that.
Yeah. It was difficult. Not only did we have the 4 hosts, our coaches, to worry about, we had our host Carson, and we had, at the time that we went back on the air, or actually started our first live show, we still had 21 artists still in the competition. So similar to Rob's story, in mid-March when this was all hitting, fortunately for The Voice, we were still in taped episodes. So our first priority was, how do we move post remote? And we did that in a matter of days. And we have a massive post department. I think 20 to 30 editors had to move to their homes and figure all that out. And then we had about 2 months to figure out how were we going to do our live shows, which turned out to be a lot of R&D, people experimenting with different softwares, how we're going to do this. Zoom was massive help to us, but we had to figure out how our coaches could actually coach their artists, there were still 20 of them. How would that real-time audio happen? How would we record their vocals remotely? It was just a lot. And then obviously, how do we get the picture as good as possible? Because we knew we wanted to really be live in the moment. We didn't want to pre-tape it and just present it as live. So I too have heard about bonded cellular and the Ustream box and Microsoft Teams. I mean, just so much stuff. And at the end of the day, you're just trying to basically distill it down to the simplest process, the sort of tried and true, like what will just have us not break down on air. And for us, typically during our live shows, we probably have close to 500 people that work on the show. The glam department alone is like 40 people. I mean, there are just so many people crawling all over the studio, and it had to distill down. I think we ended up having 30 people on site at the studio. And I was the one producer, the only producer that actually went to set, went to the lot, and everybody else, as Rob is saying, was on Zoom calls. And all the performances that were done were all like with teams on Zoom calls. We had like a tech scout Zoom call, like location scouts to figure out the sets. Then you'd move to a lighting Zoom call. Then you'd move to like a set Zoom call. Then you'd move to like a camera rehearsal Zoom call. And then it was like, okay, now it's the actual performance. It was bananas. Like people were so fortunate to still have jobs to be able to work, but those people that were working worked so hard. And just like Simone was saying, those artists did not get the voice experience of being in LA. They and their families got the experience of going to film school. They're DPs now, they're audio technicians, they're set designers. I mean, the silver lining in all of this, and I'm sure everybody feels this way, is that you were far from each other in distance, but it was so intimate. Like everybody got so much closer. And actually, in my situation, there were departments and people that never typically worked with each other that did. So all these new bonds and relationships have formed, and I think it will make the show stronger. And I'm excited to see what actually comes of that when we start to open up more.
That's so wonderful. Is that to everybody? I mean, was that something that you all experienced when you started doing some remote work, that you were working with people you'd never worked with before?
For us, for the show, we had to have an entire tech team that came in and helped to figure out the technology. Uh-huh. They decided to build our own room. So even though we were using these different platforms, they built rooms so that they could record each actor's performance live in the moment in that individual room that they were in, and then in editing, marry all of that together. So we're used to dealing with, our DPs, our sound guys, our, tech guys, and then we have this extra team that don't necessarily speak our All Rise language. Like, we're a very loving set. And so there was a little bit of, we had a little rivalry going on with one of our tech guys that we thought was out to get all of us. But yeah, it was definitely bringing in, a whole other set of people. And at the end of the day, they were all just so amazing, because I'm sure we've all experienced this. Someone's cell phone that worked perfectly yesterday was no longer compatible with the system. They're getting kicked out. Okay, can you borrow somebody's iPad? okay, how many people are on your network? Can you ask them to get off the internet for a couple hours so that you can film this stuff? And they were always just constantly like on the phone with us, helping us to get back on. So they felt like a new, part of the team, in addition to, like Audrey was saying, we normally have about 200 people, not necessarily on set, but working on each episode at one time. And this distilled to about, I think, 75 crew members. But they were in their own virtual, video villages, working together in a way that, our showrunners are usually in the writer's room. They're not on set, they can't be. So this is definitely something that we look forward to on our show. Like, well, now you can be there to say faster, funnier, better, quicker, in ways that the directors who come in who might not know us in the language of the show might ignore these things. And so if there's anything that I would love to see come from that, this is one of those things.
Mm-hmm. Now, RJ, you all had a sort of method of operation already set. Then all of a sudden this happens and everything sort of had to change. You all hadn't even premiered yet, I think, right?
Yeah, so we were the Friday before we were going to premiere, same thing that Rob went through. Whereas like in the morning, it's like, hey, if you can work from home. And then by the night, or then it was like by the afternoon, it was like, you have to work from home unless you have a reason to be here. By night, we were essentially stopped. And we had built, for people who don't know, this is like it's the first daily animated news show. And we had built in David Letterman's old screening room, this motion capture animation studio that allowed us to talk to our live guests. So it was the first show we ever pulled together where it's animated news anchors talking to live people. We find out we can't be in the studio that we'd been, the show had been in development for a year. The part that was, I think, not only, I guess the difference between like your all shows are established and creatively embraced. Like our show, the first thing we had to do was show that we could produce the show remotely. But the other thing was to show that creatively we could step into what was obviously a very scary time and have animated characters feel in touch and not feel glib in our comedy. So it was both like a production. The first thing we did was, I think on that, that Sunday afterwards is, all right, let's figure out how to let's show first of all that we can do this production wise. That took us a week. And then we had to show the network we could do it creatively, which took another week. Meanwhile, in the back of your head, and I'm sure everyone here can relate, you're thinking of like, there's hundreds of jobs here at stake. And a lot of our shows out in New York City, which is super expensive to live in. You just don't want anyone to miss a paycheck, really. So there was a lot of pressure those 2 weeks just to get back on the air. And thankfully, CBS All Access bit. I mean, what we had to do was very similar to a lot of you guys. We had to send audio equipment to all different performers. We sent what I'm wearing right here, which if my kid is screaming 10 feet away, you wouldn't hear, which is nice. We sent our computers all over the place. We basically just kind of like democratized the whole process. It takes probably the biggest files that are with animation. So a lot of figuring that out. Ultimately, though, the process takes probably about 2 hours longer, I would say. We used to kind of tape at 2 o'clock and deliver by 8 or 9 o'clock. Now we push it up to noon. So we've had about 2 hours to our workflow just based on the slowdowns. But ultimately, so thankful. We have the benefit that we have an animated virtual world that looks gorgeous, that you couldn't tell where we were producing it.
Mm-hmm. I love what you said, RJ, about tone and the kind of thought and care that went into like making sure your tone was right premiering during this time. Audrey and Rob, you work on shows that are so good at capturing the moment, and James is second to none when it comes to just like hitting at the heart of something and making you feel comforted. And the voice as a show is sort of this comfort food that people go to try to get away from whatever else is going on. What kind of conversations did you all have leading up to these remote episodes about what people needed at this time and how you were going to give that to them?
Well, I'll say for us, I think that our show always tries to be inclusive. And if we're in a studio, we're prepared to shoot 360, so the audience is part of the show. And with this, it's all about everybody being alone. And so I think when we first came out with the Home Fest particularly, we wanted to really try and get the tone right on illustrating the point that we're all separate, but we're all in this together. And it was the sort of early days of quarantine. I think looking back on it, I don't know that we all knew we'd still be in our houses at this point, and quite how long it was going to go. And so and everyone was kind of scared. I think that, there was a lot of unsteadiness. And so we wanted to show that it wasn't just something that a few people are going through. It's something that was happening globally. And so we wanted the show to be global. And that's why we had BTS in a basement in South Korea, and Andrea Bocelli with his family in Italy, Dua Lipa in the UK. I think we had somebody in New York, we had people in Los Angeles. And so it was just very much about finding the tone and making people appreciate that this was, there's nothing individual about this. Even though you're stuck, maybe perhaps alone as an individual, we're all doing it together.
So I think for us, we were trying to figure out how can we make sure the voice remained an escape for people. They could turn the news off. They don't have to deal with it. They can just immerse themselves in their favorite artists and root them on. And that said, all our coaches and everybody was remote. So we tried to incorporate a song at the top of every show that was something very heartfelt. We started the first one with James Taylor, who had been a big mentor that season. And it's so funny how things work out. We had tried to get James Taylor to be on our show for years. It was always a no, to the point where you kind of stop asking, but you never stop asking, because you never know the time that they'll actually say yes. So he had, and we thought his episodes were playing. We thought, oh my God, of all seasons, this is the season we all need James Taylor, this big warm blanket of goodness. And so we asked him to be part of the first song, and we did Shower the People, and he was part of it. And it just really made it meaningful. So we tried to continue that on, and we had a lot, just more of those type of songs. And then we tried to do some funny skit things. We had like a Zoom cocktail hour with all the coaches every week, and they would do something silly or show how they set up their little home studios or what they were doing. Kelly on the ranch, and Blake. Believe me, I'm never going to get Blake out of Oklahoma now. It was hard enough to get him here anyway. I mean, good luck to us all with that. But then we tried to touch on it and then not be about it, and just get back to letting people escape the show.
I wanted to talk about sort of the models that you all have developed and how sustainable you see them being. I know when Parks and Recreation put out their special that was filmed remotely, Mike Schur was very open about telling press, look, this is how we made it work, but this isn't sustainable. This isn't how you make TV. And I was curious, just for everybody, the things that you've heard people have done or the things that you've done yourself, do you see these being in any way sustainable models?
I mean, someone mentioned it earlier, and this is really true, and it's hard to think of this being sustainable, is that everything takes so much longer. Everything, like 3 to 5 times as long. Like, RJ, I'm surprised that you only need to move up 2 hours. That's incredible that you figured out ways to do that, because as an example, a rehearsal, a camera.
The show isn't good, by the way, I should mention.
What?
It's not a good show.
No. But I'll just give you one stat. What normally is an hour camera rehearsal per artist for a song turned into 5 hours of that artist's time. I mean, 5 hours, all those different Zoom rooms, and it was the artist's time too. So like Simone, as an actress, to do everything. Like, that's so much more of your personal time, and you're not focused on your acting and you're focused on all these other things. Normally you could be looking at a script while people are glamming you and doing all these other things. And that was just, it's the time and also the spread, because nobody really knows when things ease up, like, what will the requirements be?
Yeah, no, I think that it's interesting because we put a show out every day, what your deadlines are now has changed in the sense that before, when we were in a studio, come hell or high water, there was going to be an audience sitting in those chairs at 5 p.m. and you were putting on a show. A show was happening, whatever shape it was in. And now you don't have an audience, but your time is still moved up because it's such a pain to turn shows around. Because I long for a camera plugged into a wall, or some sort of like way to get the footage from the camera straight into an edit bay. Because the boringest parts, the upload speeds and things like that, are just such a challenge. So I hope this isn't sustainable, because I don't want to keep doing it this way. I'm happy that we put a show on. I'm happy that we're able to turn it around. I don't think we'll have an audience for a very long time, but I would love to get back into a socially distanced studio with masks when it's safe to do that. And so I think that our show will change for the foreseeable future because of the lack of audience. And we are, we're pomp and circumstance. We're dancing in streets and songs in cars and sketches in shops. And we can't really do any of those things. And some of that will come back sooner than other parts. But I also think that some of the workflows might sustain. There are things that we'll take from this experience, being able to edit remotely by using Vimeo or Evercast, and where I'm still in the room with an editor, but I'm not actually physically in a room with an editor. I think there's stuff that we'll take away from this experience. And it's made us appreciate each other a lot. You find out that you actually miss the people you work with when you can't see them and you only see them via Zoom every day.
Well, I want to come back to this subject a little bit, but first off of what you said about audiences. You don't see those coming back for some time in the form that we know them, or could you see yourselves doing a 10-person audience, or what do you think that progression is going to look like for both you and Audrey, I guess, since obviously The Voice's audience is such a huge part of the show typically?
Yeah, The Voice has a much larger audience than we do, but I think that because of that, I'd be curious how Audrey feels about it. I think that it'll be hard for us to do a sparse audience. It'll be so unfulfilling to have 35 people in a room, all 10 feet apart, trying to laugh at a monologue joke. We haven't had to cross that bridge yet, but I don't know that that'll be anything that we'll really be embracing.
I agree. Like, having a 30-person audience spaced 10 feet apart, there's just no mass, there's no energy, it's really not even worth it.
We're constantly trying to figure out, and this is all of just the actors' ruminations and waiting for what's going to come out from the unions and from, the health officials, what that will look like. But the conversation has been no background actors. Scenes, you normally shoot a courtroom scene. You have 4 cameras going. So that's 4 different, crews of people working behind each of those cameras, plus hair and makeup. The thought is, well, hair and makeup, there will be an onset and an offset. So there's no traveling back and forth. We work on Warner Brothers, where they're constantly having tours. Will that be cut off? Because I remember as the days were going, we were like, these people just got off a plane. What are they doing? Just milling about with all of us. Like, this is, and then the other part of it is, because All Rise tries to be present with what's happening in courts currently, whatever is happening legally, we will be reflecting on the show. Whatever is happening health-wise, we will be reflecting. It's not like we have to, we're in 2055 with space helmets on, pretending like, this is the post-apocalypse. Like, they just had the first jury virtual trial start, I think a week and a half ago. And so if that means that there could be an actor in New York, in Chicago, in New Orleans, and they're in this square on a screen because they are a part of this virtual jury. Will that be what the show looks like? At the same time, this kind of pretend where no one is wearing face masks or face shields. I don't think we'll have to address that, because I know that my character would say, if I'm going to be in an office, if I have to go to the courtroom, if I can't do this from home, this is what that looks like. And it's interesting, the thought of how small the teams might be. When we think about how long it took to shoot the episode, our episodes usually take about 7.5 days to film. This one took less because we're not doing multiple setups. You're not getting the over the shoulder. You're not getting, all of those different angles. Your coverage is their coverage. Everything that you're shooting in the moment. So you don't have to cover 7 different actors in a scene. And what is the bailiff's reaction? And what is the court reporter's reaction? And what is the jury thinking? And what is the audience in the gallery thinking? It's like everybody's on that screen shooting in live time. And so there was kind of a speed to it that, I know that there are certain shows where and certain directors where it's like you get 1 or 2 takes. You maybe get 3 or 4 if you're lucky. And so I think it just becomes a different muscle for the actor. It becomes a different process for production. And then technology-wise, I pray that the technology surpasses what the medical community is currently at, because who knows when we're going to get a vaccine or a treatment plan, or the hospitals will have the appropriate PPEs and ventilators and everything to handle, a second wave or a third wave. So I hope that the technology surpasses that, so that if we do have to work remotely or with less crews, it's easier to do so with these pared down production teams.
Right. Corina, which of these measures for on-set do you agree with or disagree with?
I mean, I think that we're gonna reach a situation. I mean, I agree with whatever keeps everybody safe. Ultimately, we make TV and it's fun. And I think that we can talk a lot about how entertainment is essential in times like these, but it's not so essential that we want to put people's lives at risk for it. One of the most of my job as a showrunner of a drama has become about how are we going to do this in a safe way moving forward. There's things that I never had to think about. There was a set of guidelines that loose suggested guidelines that got sort of passed around the internet on a PDF a few weeks ago. And there have been some conversations within Warner Brothers that have involved things like, can we reduce intimate contact between actors? And that's kissing, hugging, and fighting. And that's my show. And so, you start to, I think the number one priority of a showrunner for a drama is how do we keep everybody safe, but also keep everybody employed? There have been a lot of conversations about reducing our crew to a skeleton crew, which to me is heartbreaking, not just because we need everybody there to make the show as good as possible, but because that's a huge number of jobs lost. And we shoot in Mexico. It's not like we are the only television production in Santa Fe. So it's not like we fire half our crew and they go get other jobs elsewhere easily. So that's sort of been my target, has been making sure people are employed when it comes time to go back to work. We were supposed to go back to work in July. Now it's looking maybe like October. And so my next priority has been making sure people are paying their rent. We've had fundraisers and all the cast and I have been doing sort of like conventions where we get paid for them. And then we take that money and put it into a 501c3 that directly sends grants to our crew members who need to, help making it through this time, because it's not, we shoot a 13 episode show. Most of our crew, when we wrap, goes off and does a pilot or goes off and does a film before they come back to work with us. And there wasn't the opportunity to do that. And so that's been a lot of it. as far as on-set measures, you know, like Simone said, we are everything's very up in the air. We don't know what things are going to look like in October. I think in a lot of like executives' minds, there's this like, well, maybe we'll just have a vaccine and everything will be fine. And it's my job to think in terms of, well, worst case scenario, how do I keep making my show? And so, you know, one of the things that we're pretty sure is going to definitely stay, like Simone said, is we're not going to be able to pack a courtroom full of people. On our show, that the sort of the directive has been, our two main sets are a diner and a bar that are constantly packed with extras. And we're sort of like, okay, we could probably have extras in exterior scenes, socially distanced, but we're not going to be able to pack a bar full of people. So our solution then, and our show, like All Rise, takes place, despite the fact that we have aliens, it takes place now. Like we discuss it's a very political show. We discuss who's in the White House right now. We discuss, you know, the most recent episode that aired, our lead character listed off a list of undocumented immigrants that had died in custody. We're very much in the current present day. And so I thought, great, we'll do a little time jump between our seasons and we will jump over the quarantine period, but we will still acknowledge COVID happened, and our diner will be takeout only. Our bar will have shut down because they couldn't sustain through the quarantine. You know, trying to figure out how to tell a love story without any kissing has been fun. We had a writer pitch, well, what if the aliens are getting stronger and now every time they touch anyone, that person comes away with like an alien handprint on them. We were like, okay, maybe that's how we prevent these two people from kissing for an entire season, is he can't touch her because she'll start to glow. Half my show takes place in a hospital, to the point where our office, like my office in Santa Fe, can be converted to the doctor's office in like that fast. We shoot in my physical office sometimes. I said, you know, as a viewer, I don't want to watch a hospital show now where people are making out in break rooms and aren't wearing masks. And I thank the Lord I don't write for Grey's Anatomy. Because like all I can think about is how stressful it must be to have a show where all of your emotional content takes place in a hospital and now you're supposed to cover your actors from head to toe. So how do you
To be fair, they were surgeons, so they were already covered most of the time, right?
But they can take their masks off and yell at each other. And now we can't do that. You know?
Guys, on that note, we are running a little bit out of time, but I thank you so much for all of y'all's time. And I hope that we get to next year be back in a room together talking about how we made it through the pandemic production-wise. It won't be on a Zoom call. I hope we never use the word Zoom again. But thank you all so much for like lending your thoughts and your expertise to this discussion. I think this is a unprecedented time. And it's so wonderful to have unprecedented talent like you all working behind the scenes on it.